This is On the Brink, and I'm Rosemary Armao. I'm a travel addict. There is nothing I would rather do than visit new, remote, exotic places and spend time there, a lot of time, move in even. I've gone into debt for travel. I suffer secondhand clothes and shabby furniture in my personal life because I would really rather spend my money on plane tickets. I cannot be at any time without a future destination to look forward to. I have been to all 7 continents, all but one state. I've lost count of the number of countries. My mother tells people that she doesn't know where this wanderlust came from because she mostly didn't even want to go across town. As kids, we couldn't afford vacations or trips, and there were 5 of us to feed. The Catskill Game Farm or Lake George were about the outer limits for the Armaos. And forget about hitting up souvenir shops or restaurants. Mom would just pack a lunch. We had to make do. I have a room full of dusty knickknacks these days because I always hit the gift stores. I still do pack a mom lunch, even though now I have to get it past TSA. But you see the point, right? Travel is my best, fastest, and most assured escape from that sense of dread that I harbor, looking at politics or the economy, our future, our environment. My aim is to see everything on the planet while we still have one. Nevertheless, things do not always work out when you travel. Aside from the TSA, aside from ridiculous ticket prices and uncomfortable airports and middle seat squish, and did I mention TSA? Aside from all of that, things sometimes just seriously go awry when you try to escape through travel. And then you have to rely on ingenuity, quick wits, and a sense of humor. I know I've asked on my Facebook page for you to share your travel horrors with me, and I've gotten an earful. Today, in this podcast, I want you to hear about some of these tales from my friends and from my travel companions. So I want you to meet Hawley Johnson. She's the best travel companion of all time. Hawley lives in Vermont officially, but in the world, really. She is the Associate Director of Columbia University's Global Freedom of Expression Organization. Since 2014, she's managed the development of what's called the Case Law Database. She's got more than 12 years of experience in international media development. She's worked academically and professionally. We work together in Eastern Europe, and we've traveled to many places. And we've had some adventures, wouldn't you say, Holly?
We've had an amazing time. And I think we've been traveling together for, oh my gosh, probably going on 24 years now. So we have many stories to tell. We could probably keep you guys here for hours and hours.
I need you to pick one of them. We
Well,
debated this ahead of time. And I don't know. One of my favorite is the Israel trip.
yes, because this was, I think, emblematic of a lot of the issues that kind of crop up when we travel together. And this was one that we did probably, I think, back in 2007. And it was supposed to be a long weekend. And this was one of those ones where your mom just rolled her eyes because we were going to go to Israel for a long weekend. And we were going to go to the Golan Heights for a food tour with friends that we met when we were all working in Bosnia, and they had left Bosnia and they were now working at the US Embassy in Tel Aviv. And your mom's like, gosh, you guys get on like planes like I get on a bus. You're just going to like Israel for a weekend? We're like, not a problem. But sure enough, as things happen
There
with
was
us,
a small problem. Yes.
exactly. And as soon as we started to plan this trip, fighting broke out. And there was a lot of hostilities between Israel and Lebanon at the time. And we were kind of laughing amongst ourselves. We're like, oh gosh, we're going to have to wait for them to stop shooting before we can like finish our trip. And we had also gone to Thailand a couple of years prior, and we were laughing then because like, oh, as soon as we plan a trip, like governments topple and the wars start. And with Thailand, as soon as we planned that trip, all of a sudden there was protests and the airport was occupied and we had to like again postpone our trip. So long story short, we finally are able to make our plans to go to Tel Aviv. And we arrive in Tel Aviv and we're going through the passport checks and everything, and they call me aside and they take great interest in my passport and they keep me there for 4 hours. Meanwhile, you've gone out, you're with our host, and you guys are waiting and waiting for me to come out. And the problem was a visa that I had in my passport from Algeria. And this was based upon a trip that I had taken a year prior to visit you there when you were working there on a joint project. And so the backstory with the visa was that as part of the Algeria problem, that project that we had, and it was funded by the State Department, you were based in Algiers, and my part of the project was to host two journalists from Algeria for 6 months at New York University. And when they came, one of the things we did is I took them down to DC. Of course, they have to see that part of the United States. And I took them to the embassy, this lovely meeting with the charge d'affaires. And he's like, "Oh, Hawley, you have to see beautiful Algeria. And when you're ready to go, just send me your passport and I'll get you all hooked up." So I did that. And I sent Ahmed my passport within 48 hours. He returns it to me. And I have this multiple entry exit visa for Algeria, which apparently they only give to terrorists. So we had an amazing trip to Algeria. And I didn't really think anything about it until I arrived in Tel Aviv. And they took great interest in this. And they thought, this woman's up to something. Meanwhile, I'm like this little petite blonde woman from Newton, Massachusetts. And I was, raised on Wonder Bread and Cheese Whiz. And there's just like no way that I fit that profile. But anyway, they finally let me out. And I rejoined Rosemary, you and our host. And the next day, we were destined to go to Petra for the day in Jordan. And so what this meant for us, as you well remember, is we had to get up early and get a plane from Tel Aviv to Eilat. And then we had to walk across the border. It's like 2 blocks, like no big deal. It's a common tourist route. And then you get a taxi across the border and it takes you to Jordan, to Petra. So when we left, I just got a few like raised glances at my passport, but no big deal. We get over the border with some minor drama, but nothing major. Now, you may remember, Rosemary, that we had a lovely trip to Petra, except for the fact that the tour guide groped you and grabbed your boob. But other than that,
God, I did forget about that. That's right.
it wasn't
This was such a
highlight.
memorable trip. Yeah. I couldn't pay attention much to ancient archaeology after that. Right. All right.
That was apparently the least of our problems. So we had this great trip. I did a little bit of shopping. So this is a foreshadowing of things to come. Had to pick up all the usual tchotchkes and tourist paraphernalia while we were in Jordan. And we get across the border, or we're trying to get across the border at the end of the day. And the Israelis again take a look at my passport and they're like, "I'm sorry, you have to kind of go and sit over here and we're going to talk to you soon." And there, Rosemary and I, there we sat for hours and hours and hours. And it wasn't just us. There was an American gentleman with his son. Now, his son, as you remember, had been in Damascus teaching English. This was like back in that brief window of opportunity where Americans were allowed to go and do stuff. The other people that were stuck at the border with us were a lovely couple, I believe, from Slovakia, who were biking for peace through the Middle East. And they were making beaded jewelry along the way. Well, I think the Israelis must have swabbed every bead they had on their bikes. And we were there for hours and hours. And so by the time we got through, after they questioned me about my grandparents and all my email addresses and everything was fine, we got to the airport and it was all closed down. Our flight was gone. We couldn't really communicate with our hosts. And we're stuck a million miles away from Tel Aviv. We had no idea how we're going to get back. We didn't even have our driver's licenses to rent a car. So what do we do? Well, we got to get a drink. We got to figure out what to do. So we found this awesome, like little like falafel stand. It was like half falafel stand, half restaurant because they served wine. And we ordered some food and drink and we're sitting there. And there's this awesome picture of us with like a big map out, like, "Oh my God, we have to get from Eilat to Tel Aviv." And I've got my wine glass pointing at Tel Aviv. This is where we have to go. And the owner of the restaurant sees this going on and he comes over and he's chatting with us. He's trying to help us figure out, like, what are you guys going to do? How are you going to get back? And there was a lovely couple next to us and they heard the whole story and they recommended that we just simply take an overnight bus from Tel Aviv, I mean, from Eilat to Tel Aviv. And we said that would be an awesome idea. So they brought us to the bus station.
That's right. They drove us. We
Thank
made so
God.
many friends on this trip. Thank God. Right.
Everybody was so nice except for the border guards. So when we got to the bus station, luckily they were there because everything was in Hebrew. We never would have made it on our own. And you may remember we had this fabulous bus driver who was a Willie Nelson lookalike with like the
Yep.
big cowboy hat and the gray hair. And he was literally wearing about 100 pounds of turquoise Indian style jewelry.
I remember him vividly. I have many pictures of him. And
Fabulous.
we did eventually get back.
We did. We rolled into Tel Aviv, I think around 6 a.m., got some croissants, made our way back to our host place, and had a really great food tour eventually. But then, the drama continued when I had to leave. And I remember our host saying to me, he's like, sometimes it's harder to leave Israel than it is to enter. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like Hotel California. And sure enough, when we got to the air, or I got to the airport, I don't think you were with me at this point. I'm going through the security check and they open up my bag, which of course was just the end of it. And the woman's going through everything. She sees all the dead sea salts and the creams. They're swabbing and scanning everything multiple times. And then she finds my tchotchkes from Jordan. And she pulls out one of those Khalifa Arab headdresses that I had bought for my then boyfriend, now husband. And it was meant to be a joke gift because at the time he was living at the top of a hill in Bloomfield, New York. I was like, oh, he's the Sheikh of Bloomfield. It'll be really funny. The security guard was not amused. She's like, what is this? And I'm like, well, it's a tablecloth. And she snarled at me and she goes and she gets a security guard. And the guard then, they pack up my suitcase and he escorts me to the gate. And the guard sat with me until I boarded.
Till you were on the plane.
I was escorted out of the state of Israel.
So you see, we have many stories. You have recounted that perfectly. You remember it better than I do. I have vivid memories of our trip to Rwanda. We're going to take a break here, and then we're going to talk about that awfulness. A reminder that segments of On the Brink now can be heard weekly on the Hudson Mohawk Magazine. That is a feature of WOOC 105.3 FM. The magazine is a volunteer-produced local news hour that aims to provide sanctuary for discussion of topics that affect our community. It's very cool. We like to think that On the Brink can add a lot to that discussion. But you can listen to On the Brink in full anytime on, let's see, Apple, YouTube, Google, Spotify. Think of another podcast platform. We're there too. We need you to like us on these platforms. Please rate us. Please subscribe. None of this costs you anything in money. And it will help us persuade more sponsors to join us, which in turn means we can give more and better shows to you. So I was the one very excited about our trip to Rwanda, where we were going to go see gorillas. And with me was my travel companion, Hawley Johnson, who's going to help me remember this travel horror story right now. We got off to a bad break. We got off to a bad start. Sorry, I said break because of you, Zach. We got off to a very bad start on this trip because we met our friend Jennifer, who made us a wonderful pork dinner. Unfortunately, I did not realize that the pork had some bones in it and managed to chip a tooth. So that was the start of the trip. But I said, no, we just go on, we just forget it's there. And we go and we travel by bus, which was an adventure. You remember that? To go to the bathroom.
Very well.
Yeah, there are no bathroom stops. The driver stops in the middle of the road, fields on both sides, men go on one side, women on the other into the fields, do their business, and then come back on. And then we arrive at the gorillas and we begin what we thought would be a fun and leisurely hike up the mountainside. And then Holly's the better hiker. So you went on ahead of me. It was, I think Jennifer and I went on one trip. We were going to go see where the gorillas stayed with Diana Fossey, and you went up to the top of the mountainside. And all I remember is how slippery and horrible it was. It had been raining. If it had been an American hiking place, it would have been shut down. It was way too dangerous. And the only way you could keep your footing was to use the hiking sticks. And that didn't even help. At one point, I fell backward. There are stinging nettles every place, so they're biting into your skin. And the pole pulled up my arm, and I could not move my arm after that. And I kept falling, and my arm is dragging. And we come to the spot where our group was to meet Holly's group. And she goes, "Oh my God, you look like a mess. You're all muddy." And she begins laughing, and I burst out crying. Do you remember all of this? It was
I do,
oh
and
my
it
gosh.
was so sad because I went on my hike with like all sorts of hubris, and that really is what like cinched it to me, because they're like, "Oh, you should get a porter and you should have walking sticks," and I'm like, "No way, I'm a major hiker and I'm fit and I can walk to the top of a volcano, no problem." But as you mentioned, it was the rainy season, and it was
Ugh.
just like trying to slog yourself up this enormous hill with like literally feet full of mud, and people were
Yep.
just sliding down, falling into the nettles. And so we finally get to the top of the volcano, and it was extraordinary, it was magnificent. But then I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get down this thing. And
Yeah.
as we're going down, I was sliding and I was exhausted. And because of the altitude, I thought my lungs were going to explode. I couldn't breathe. And so I ended up like glomming on to one of the porters who was helping. Some other woman had paid for a porter, but I like totally took him over. And I was like holding on to him the whole way down. And then he loaned me his walking stick. So there I was, like with the porter and the walking stick that I didn't pay for, but he got me down. And then I remember
Until I took him over because I'm like injured and unwalking,
exactly.
unable to walk. And we need to insert here. You saw this magnificent view that few people in the world will ever see. So it was totally worth all of this. I saw gorillas. I sat right next to a silverback gorilla. It was extraordinary. I would not have exchanged it for anything, but I thought I was going to die coming down. This man, who I also did not pay for, we tipped heavily at the end. I did not pay for him, but he basically carried me down the mountain. I was unable to even, I was almost hysterical at the time. Although, the retelling of it, it makes it sound more glamorous than it really was. It was just a really long, awful slog, wasn't it? Oh,
It was horrible, and I felt so badly for you, but you were such a trooper for the rest of the trip, and you made it through. And I have a funny story about the grills, which you may remember when we were out there with the group, and they kept saying to us, "You're not supposed to get closer than 6 feet," but everybody was. And we were sitting amongst this
yep.
incredible family of gorillas. So there was the
Mhm.
silverback and a couple of females and lots of these little babies. And I remember standing there, kind of like holding myself together, watching this female chew on this, I don't know, stick. It was her lunch. And she's munching and munching, and I'm watching her. And then all of a sudden, she looks at me and we lock gaze. And I'm like, oh, we're bonding. And then she looks at me and she charges at me and she smacks me out of the way. And the guards with the machine guns all of a sudden come running at me. They're like, "You okay?" And I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm fine." Meanwhile, the gorilla is completely oblivious to all of this. She just reaches behind me and grabs an enormous thistle and starts chewing on it. I was just an obstruction to her lunch.
To
And
her lunch, I remember.
she cared
We we
nothing
have
about.
neglected we have neglected to mention that, yes, our groups, all of the hiking groups go out. They don't care if you die sliding down the rainy mountains, but they're afraid of poachers or of animals coming at you. So there are really heavily armed guards in the front or the back. They won't help you if you fall. They'll just kill somebody who tries to come at you, I guess. I don't know. But, the thing about travel is you have to keep your eye on the big picture, which was to see gorillas, which is to see scenery that's unlike any place else in the world, for which you have paid a ton of money to get there to do it, right? It's a privilege to be there. And if there's a hardship, you got to just power through it. You'll just lose everything if you give in to that. If I had gone to the hospital there, and that would be my story, talking about a Rwandan hospital, I don't think so. I did not have that arm operated on until 6 months later back in Albany. But a sense of humor is also good. You're
You
pretty good about
absolutely need
that.
that.
So I've called you the perfect travel companion, and I guess I should explain why I think that. Hawley eggs me on to do things that on my own I think I would be afraid to do. You make me laugh all the time. You don't have to keep to a regular schedule. I don't think I could ever travel with someone who said, "Oh, it's noon, we have to eat," because it just doesn't work that way, right? What else does it take to be a perfect travel companion?
I think you're right. You have to have that spirit of just like enjoying the chaos as it emerges. It's almost like the gods are laughing at you. You got to ride the wave and try to find the humor in the moment. And think about like years later now, we're sitting here laughing about all these stories. These are all awesome stories in the making. So I think all of the things that went wrong, we somehow found a way of making it funny.
Of turning it into a good. One of our other travel companions is Drew Sullivan. Listeners to this podcast have heard Drew talk. He's an awesome journalist. We're not talking about his journalism today. We're talking about his travel. And he has the most amazing bus story traveling through Eastern Europe that I've ever heard. And he is going to share it with us. This news is just in. The Nature Logs exhibit at the Colony Public Library has gotten extended because of that ice and snowstorm that we had in the Capital District. So the beautiful photos by the Stoners, that husband and wife team behind Nature Logs, will stay on display through April 3rd. I really urge you to stop by, as I did, to check out these. They're just sumptuous photos. The solar eclipse shots are worth a view, but I'm telling you, there's a portrait of an eagle taken in Cohoes that is worth the trip all by itself. Really remarkable. They're on sale at the exhibit. You can also find more of the terrific photos by the Stoners and some of their writing about nature on their website. You can buy prints and cards and other stuff there too. So just go to naturelogs.com and let me spell that for you. NATURELOGUES. Totally great stuff. Thanks.
So this whole episode started when I bought a ticket on a Zeitgeist airline. That was an airline that flew, between the Kosovar communities of Switzerland and Kosovo. But for some reason, it stopped in Sarajevo, where I was living. So I caught this airline. It was like called Air Commerce or something. And I caught a flight, and I was the only one they picked up in Sarajevo. Everybody else was already on the plane from Switzerland. And I got on the plane with this gigantic bag, and they didn't have any checking capacity. So I'm like, what do I do with my bag? And she says, just leave it in the aisle. It was kind of that airline. And so I get on this airline. I fly down to Pristina in Kosovo, and I'm working there for a couple of weeks. And I get done, and I go back to the airport to catch my flight, and there's no airline. And it takes me I keep getting told, oh, it's coming in, it'll be late. I get told 20 stories. And then I realize nobody knows what's going on and that the airline doesn't exist anymore, is what I find out later. So the only way back to Sarajevo back then was by bus. And so I went to the bus station and bought a ticket. And apparently, on a bus that had about 80 seats, they sold about 350 tickets. And so I show up, and there's a gigantic Balkan fan, which is what happens when everybody kind of pushes towards the front from all directions to get on the bus. And they won't let anybody on. And they were pointing to certain people in the audience and who could get on. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. Nobody talked English. And so I just raised my American passport, and he pointed at me. And I said, oh, great. And I get on the bus, and the guy asks for my passport, and then he he tells me to sit in the front seat, which I thought was, wow, I'm getting, preferential treatment here. Maybe it's because I'm an American, and Kosovars like Americans because of the war. But there's something else that was at play. And he went and he took the passports of about 6 young guys who were sitting in the other front seats. And he took all their passports and he took my passport and he locked it in a box and put it up above his seat. And I'm like,
Oh my.
what's going on here? I can't quite figure it out. So anyway, we start to drive and the guy next to me hands me a beer, and so I don't, I'm trying to be polite. So he's drinking a beer. So I start to drink a beer. And then I look down in his bag and he's got like 60 beers. And so I'm like, okay, this is going to be a short bus trip. And I start talking with him, and he's the only one who really speaks. A couple of them speak a few words of English, and he explains to me. I said, "Why did they lock your passports up in the top?" And he said, "Well, we're all KLA members. That's the Kosovo Liberation Army, and so they were the ones who were fighting the Serbs during the Balkan Wars in Kosovo." And I said, "Oh, so what's the problem? I mean, you're KLA." And they go, "Well, the bus goes through Montenegro, which is Serb-held country, and it could get really bad. So they're trying to protect us." I said, "Great." And he put me up in the front with the rest of you. Like my American passport's going to do something, or they figured the American will get beaten up too, which is a good possibility. So we might as well have a beer. So we start having a beer, and the guy goes up and he puts an M&M tape in the bus, a plaything, and an M&M tape starts to play, and it's that vicious, violently anti-homophobic, one with the swearing and everything like that. So we're and he's playing it really, really loud. And we're sitting there listening to Eminem on this bus going through Kosovo, which is, not traveling more than 30 kilometers an hour, which is about 24 miles an hour. And we're driving about 24 miles an hour. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a really long bus trip. But we start drinking and we start telling stories, and they find out I'm a journalist, and I find out they kill people, and they're telling me about killing Serbs in the Kosovo, in the Preševa Valley, and what it was like, and just horrible, war crime atrocities to the investigative reporter sitting next to them as we drive the night through Kosovo and into Montenegro. And I probably had about 10 or 12 beers by this point, when we hit the Montenegrin border. And so, but I'm having a good time, and we're talking and we're listening to, mind-splitting Eminem, and we get into Montenegro and start driving. And I realize I really need to, I've been drinking too many beers. I need to go to the bathroom. And so I asked the bus driver, I said, when are we going to stop? And he said, Pristina. And I said, how long is that? And he's about 3 hours. I'm like, I'm not going to make it 3 hours. I said, can you just stop at the next place? I really need to go. And he said, no, last time we stopped, they pelted the bus with rocks and broke windows. So we're not stopping. We're just going to go straight through, and no stopping, and just, keep driving. And I was kind of drunk, and I was a little bit, angry at myself for not stopping, for not at the border, for not, going to the bathroom. And, I just say, okay, I'm just going to hold it. And, when you try to hold something for a long, long time, it can be quite painful. And so finally I went to the bus driver. I pulled a cup out of the garbage, and I went and, I started unzipping my pants, and I showed him I was going to pee in the cup. And of course, he started laughing, and we pulled off in the darkness on the side of the road. And I get out, and the whole bus empties, and all the women are squatting and peeing, and all the guys are peeing. And the problem is, I've been now holding it for about an hour and a half. And once you hold yourself for that long,
You can't go.
you can't go. It's a little bit hard. It's like my plumbing was all screwed up then. And so, I said, just wait. And so the whole bus is staring out at me, laughing. And here's the American who can't pee. And, So anyway, finally I pee, and it was at 10 minutes later, I get back out and everybody's laughing, and they think it's really funny. And we start drinking more beers and talk about killing people again and stuff. So, it was all very surreal is the only way to describe it. And we finally get into Sarajevo at about, 1 in the morning. And we're now drunk and we think we're buddies. And I say, so what are you doing? And he's like, well, I got a flight out tomorrow, and I'm like, where are you staying tonight? He said, oh, I'm gonna crash in the park, and just wait for the plane. And I said, my girlfriend's out of town. I got a spare room. You can sleep there, and catch your flight in the morning. And he says, fine. And so we get to the thing. I go and I look for a cab, and I look behind me, and there's six of them standing there. And
You
he goes, "Oh,
invited the whole KLA into your apartment.
apparently I did. Yeah, it was just the one that spoke English that I was talking, sitting next to most of the time. I thought the invite was just for him. I find out the others are not leaving town so quickly. They plan to stay around in
Oh
Sarajevo for a little
no.
while. And so the one I could speak to coherently and was pretty nice guy. He was going to his wife in Spain's place, and everything was fine. The others are just crazed. And they proceed to stay at my house for the next 3 weeks.
Are
And
you kidding me? 3 weeks it was?
3 weeks.
Oh,
And they don't shower once during those 3 weeks. I went into the bathroom. I showed them. I said, this is how the water turns on. Here's the soap. Here's towels, and they're like, ah, ha, 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 and they walk away, and you know, they would not take a shower, and they were drunk pretty much continuously. And one of them spoke a little bit of English, and I said, what are you going to do? And they're like, well, we're going to hang around Bosnia for a while, and then we're going to sneak across the border into Croatia. And I said, oh, great plan. Do you have any idea when you're going? And they're like, maybe another couple of weeks. I don't know. So, finally I'm like making up story. My girlfriend's coming back, I can't say she's Serb because, I don't know, they were
oh my God.
trying to
They'd
kill
kill
her.
her.
Exactly.
The food and alcohol bill must have been enormous.
Well, and then they kept calling me all the time. They called me like, every day, and they would sit down in the middle of town in Sarajevo. They have all those outdoor cafes, and they would drink and they would oogle the women. And, they would say stuff that I could only imagine, but, they would do, kind of headlights and everything like that. They
Oh,
were real pigs. And so, I'm trying to get them out of the house. And then, and they're like, oh, you're our greatest friend. You're our only friend. You're going to help us. We're going to go into business with you. They got all these dreams, you know. I was talking to one of them, and, you know, I kind of said, does it kind of upset you that, you've been in the army and now you really not sure what you're going to do? And he looks at me and he goes, I've killed so many people. I don't care about anything anymore.
oh my God.
And then he goes, do you need anybody killed?
Drew, you let that opportunity go?
And I said, not right now. There's nobody on the list right now, but you know what? If I do, you're the first person I'm coming to
Oh
because you're my friend.
And that is your worst travel story ever. Or maybe
And
the
let me
best.
buy you another round of beers. They did finally leave. They did finally leave. I washed all the sheets and I couldn't get the smell out, so I burned them. And it was weird. It was weird, but it was a good experience. I at least got a good story out of it.
And you have told that story many times. I know.
I
know.
have.
It's a good one. It is a good one. Okay, spring is finally here. This is good news, and I know it definitely because finally the Apple Barn and Country Bake Shop is reopening shortly for its 2024 season. Opening day is April 20th. The April Barn has been, as many of you know, a mainstay on Route 7 near Bennington, Vermont for just decades. The main draw to me will be and always will be the pies and donuts. Oh, I love them so. But you might also be interested in a series of fun festivals that they are planning at the Apple Barn this year, one every month. starting in April with the celebration of maple. Plenty of maple syrup and candies and all kinds of goodies will be there. You can find out more and check out the baked goods at theapplebarn, all one word.com. We are back, and we are talking with Hawley Johnson and some of our other friends about trips that we took that did not turn out exactly as we thought they were going to. They were kind of fun and they make great stories now, but they did not work out at the time. Hawley, another one of those was, which one shall we pick? Should
Maybe
we talk
Var,
about
because that was
Havar?
funny.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll go with that one. You start.
Oh, that was awesome. That was, again, another one of these long weekends where it's just incredible how many things can go wrong in such a short period of time. But for that one, you and I set out in Drew's car, and we were all excited because we were going to the sunniest island in Europe. And we were going to have this awesome weekend basking in the sun, taking boats out. And we're driving and we get to near the island and we get stuck in this horrendous traffic jam. And we were there for hours. And you may remember one of the traffic guys.
It's a single road. It's a single lane road.
Yes.
You have to set this scene. On either side, there are, well, it isn't just a drop off. It's a freaking cliff down to a bottomless ravine. No guardrails. They do not believe in guardrails in this part of Eastern Europe. And Hawley had said, oh yeah, we can drive there. She forgot to mention she can't drive stick. The car we borrowed was a stick, which meant I was driving. I am not that good of a driver. And I am trying not to kill us as we're on this road. We're stuck. There was no way to turn around, no way to get around whatever was going on. And eventually we realized that what we had come upon was a truck. It was a bigger than a car. It was some sort of little truck that had gone off the road. It was precariously balanced on the edge of a cliff. And other men in cars that were behind them had all gotten out and they were trying to pull it back onto the road with ropes. That's what we were behind.
It was crazy. And I remember the guy coming up to us. He's like, you have to back up. You back up in river. And we're like, no, we're not going into the river. And so that was like, I think the first sign that things were going downhill for us.
It's like one thing goes wrong and it's an avalanche after that.
Exactly it. And so we finally get to the island and we get settled. We're like, oh, we're going to get massages. Isn't this going to be awesome? And then the skies opened up and it rained for like 2 days. It was biblical. And it got to the point where like there was no electricity. We were sitting around in the dark. There was no food. The ATMs were out. We couldn't even get money. So we sat in the hotel restaurant just looking out at the rain coming down. And the only thing we could eat was like sliced tomatoes, and we were drinking red wine. And I remember
I like that part. I like the red wine part. Thank God for that. Yeah.
Well, we were in the right part of the world for tomatoes and red wine. But I remember the waitress was standing next to our table looking out the window with us, and she's making like the sign of the cross, is like the lightning's coming down. And so finally, the skies start to clear and the sun starts to make its way out. And you and I decided, all right, we're going to go out and kind of see what's going on. And we walked to the top of the hill above the hotel. And all of a sudden, we heard all of this singing and laughter from down in the village. And it was like that moment in The Grinch, when the Grinch hears all like, them singing at Christmas.
People in Whoville are singing, yes.
Exactly. But this was the drunk tourists. These were all the people that had spent while it was raining out, they were hanging out in the bars drinking, and they had started drinking all of these old Tito era drinking songs. So it was mass hilarity. And we decided, all right, we got to go into town and see what's going on now. And
you ended up going into the sea because you had brought 23 bathing suits to spend time when the sunniest place in Europe. And you did go into the sea. I don't think I did. I think I stood on the shore and took pictures of you. But yeah, that was another memorable trip.
Yeah, so we have to go back sometime to Var and hope it doesn't rain on us again.
Do listeners know where Hvar is? We probably should explain that.
In Croatia.
It's a small island, off the coast of Croatia. It's stunningly beautiful. but kind of primitive from a tourist point of view. This traveling in Eastern Europe and Africa and the places that we sort of like to go. It's not the same as being in the United States or in Western Europe. The amenities are kind of lacking. Their money is an issue. Can't use credit cards. All of it adds to the mystique of it, though. I just never feel like so much alive as when we're in one of these situations where you could die. Anything could have happened and nobody would even know about it. They wouldn't find our bodies for days. And there's just something that makes you feel very alive as you solve that problem. Don't you agree? You just like to shop.
Yeah, well, a lot of it's a shopping, but I do like that sense of adventure where it's always something new and something different that you're encountering. And there's just that excitement and wonder about it all. It's not like when you go to, a new city and it's like, oh, there's McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken and everybody looks the same and they're listening to the same music. It's being in a completely different environment and meeting completely different people. It's a really wonderful, eye-opening, perspective-changing situation.
And I have to say that there are crabby, awful people, TSA agents and border security everywhere, but most people, they sort of like that you are enjoying their country. That even when you're in trouble and you need their help, they want to help you because they want you to like it. And that's very compelling to me. Yeah, I feel like you really see the world. Do you think travel changes you?
Oh my God, absolutely. And always, I think, for the better. Because you never stop being curious. You never stop wanting to explore and learn more. Because everything's a learning experience. You learn about yourself, you learn about the world, you learn about other people. And it just makes
yourself too. Hawley, you learn about yourself too. That's the best part. It's like how much you can stand, how much pain you can endure, whether you're going to be pleasant to other people when you just really want to bite their heads off. It's a test. It's a test of you as a person, I think.
And it doesn't forces you to grow as a person and to kind of overcome a lot of that stuff. And it forces you to be courageous. You otherwise you just can't do it.
A lot of people don't do it, and I feel sorry for them. They're fearful of these sorts of things happening that we're talking about. Whereas you and I go off, and the first thing we're thinking about is, okay, what's going to happen this time?
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to take another break, but when we come back, you're going to hear from another friend of ours, a fellow traveler, Aida Cerkez. Again, listeners of this podcast know of Aida as her war correspondent days. She's recounted, and she's a great political reporter still. She's also a fantastic traveler. She's going to tell you about the trip she and her ex-husband took to Turkey once. On the Brink is brought to you by the Donna Frank team of luxury property specialists at Berkshire Hathaway Blake Realtors. Donna is a personal friend, so I can vouch for her. She has major people skills, lots of energy, and tons of real estate expertise. She and her team have become near routine winners of awards for their sales, which go into the multi-millions just about every year. So really, think about this. If you are buying, selling, investing, or you're just kind of researching real estate, she's the person to contact, and you can do it at DonnaFed, DONAFED, at gmail.com. Okay, so one of the real contenders for worst trip ever taken by a human, I think has to be awarded to my friend Aida Cerkez, who had a memorable trip with an ex-husband several years ago. We have her here, and she's going to tell us all about it. I've heard this story. It still makes me laugh every time I hear it. Sorry to laugh at your distress, Aida, but take it away.
Every time I tell this story, I have to lie down for a half an hour afterwards. It was about 15 years ago. I was living in Sarajevo and my ex-husband was working in Dubai, actually in Abu Dhabi.
He was not your ex-husband at the time.
He was my husband at the time.
Correct.
So we decided we're going to take a vacation. We're going to spend 7 days in Antalya in Turkey, just doing nothing. So we found some arrangement and we paid for it in a beautiful all-inclusive hotel on the beach. I was just going to go and have a good time. Fine. I was supposed to fly from Sarajevo to Istanbul. He was supposed to fly from Dubai to Istanbul. We were supposed to meet in Istanbul and then fly together to Antalya. And that's it. Fine. Okay. And the trip was supposed to start on Thursday. Wednesday evening, he calls me to say he can't make it because his company needs him in Abu Dhabi. And would I mind coming to Abu Dhabi instead? They will pay for a hotel. And, I don't have a visa. Oh, they'll deal with the visa during the day. While you're on the plane to Istanbul, the visa will be done. My company will take care of that. So, okay. I was really angry, but I didn't really have a choice. Oh, and they will reimburse us for the arrangement in Antalya. Okay. So I repacked to desert. and I took the morning flight to Istanbul, the original flight. And I had a 6-hour layover, which was apparently, they said, enough to get me this visa. So I'm sitting at the Istanbul airport. Now, you can't board a plane to the Arab Emirates unless you have a visa. So when they called my name, I went to the counter and said, your visa has been handled and you can board the plane. Fine, I'm going to make it in time. Super. It was about maybe 8 o'clock in the evening when I boarded this plane to Dubai. I'm flying into Dubai, maybe it was even later because I know I landed at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I get to the passport control. They look at my passport and they say, you don't have a visa. I say, yes, I do, because I wouldn't be able to board the plane. I was informed in Istanbul that I did get a visa. Oh, yeah, we see the process of visa. The visa application has been made and the process is ongoing, but it needs a last stamp. Okay, so get me the last stamp. Well, that office is closed. It's the office over there. And as soon as they open, I'm sure this will be done. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. When do they open? Actually, not until Sunday. Because Friday and Saturday, they don't work in Dubai. I said, what do you mean? So the same thing, obviously, my ex-husband was waiting for me. I called him on the phone and I said, this and this is happening. And I could really hear from the place I was to behind customs and passport control, I could hear his voice screaming at people. And he's going to try to fix this. So there were these phone calls going back and forth. Who are you going to call at 3 o'clock in the morning? So around 4:30, I was so tired, I started crying. This is not going anywhere. And I said, I am so angry with you. I'm just not going to take your credit card now, and I'm going to buy myself the most expensive first-class ticket to anywhere else in the world. I'm going to spend the vacation by myself. And I go to the counter, and I said, fly me out of here anywhere. Get to the counter, and I see all, like Kuala Lumpur, Sydney. And then there was this flight in 45 minutes back to Istanbul, and I thought, I'm going to fly back to Istanbul, take a flight to Antalya, and just spend 7 days in, Antalya by myself. I don't care about him. Which is what I told him.
I'm beginning to see why it's an ex-husband.
Uh-huh. Oh, not only that. So I boarded this plane, and I was so tired. I haven't been sleeping, and I was rubbing my eyes, and they were itchy because I thought because I'm tired. So I get on this plane, and I took a nap, and I landed about 9 o'clock in Istanbul. But that was not enough. I still see that I'm just about to faint. I went to the bathroom to wash my face because my eyes were so itchy because I was so tired. The phone rings and it's him. I said, what? I decided, he says, I decided to drop all this. I'm just going to fly over to Istanbul and join you. I don't care what they say. I'm going to join you in Antalya. So I'm heading now from Abu Dhabi to Dubai to take the first flight. I said, okay, cool. So I board the plane to Antalya, and during the flight, my eyes close. I can't see anything anymore. It's so itchy. The stewardess approached me to ask me if I'm okay, and I said, I'm just a little bit tired. Can you bring me some napkins? And she did, and the tears were coming out of my eyes, and I thought, I just can't wait to get to the hotel room. By the way, 45 minutes in Dubai was not enough for my suitcase to be loaded on the next flight. So I gave them the address of the hotel, and it's gonna come like 24 hours later, they're gonna deliver it. Wow. As we were approaching Antalya, I hear the pilot saying that everybody should remain seated. We have a medical emergency. Okay. I thought, who the hell travels now with a heart condition on this flight? I'm being miserable anyway, And then I thought maybe I could actually ask to go with this person to see what's happening with my eyes. But somehow I couldn't see the stewardess, or she wasn't available or something. But I did see a little bit through the window that a ambulance car was parking right next to the plane, and that 4 big guys are coming in with stretchers. Okay, so, and they come in and they come to me. I'm the medical emergency. What's happening? I said, ma'am, you can't see your face, but please follow us. I said, I don't need the stretcher, I can walk. So they walked me out. I can barely see anything. They put me into this ambulance car. I have nothing. I just have my pouch around my waist, nothing, and my passport in it. And there's this nurse, she holds my hands and talks to me in English. I said, don't worry about it. We're going to the international hospital in Kemer. You'll be taken care of, blah, blah, blah. And I hear the sirens, and all I can see a little bit are these life support machines dangling over my head. And so, okay, well, actually, this is not bad. I really want to know what's wrong with me. I can't see anything. So we're going, Nina, 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 off to Kemer. My phone rings. I take it out of my pouch. It's Mike, my ex-husband. And I say, hello? And he goes, Aida? Yes. I need to tell you something. And I said, I need to tell you something too. And he goes, I need you to sit down. I'm laying. I'm in jail. What? I'm in jail. I was arrested at the Dubai airport because when I arrived at passport control, that's when we figured out that my visa expired. I'm illegal in the country. And, I'm in detention here. I can't leave the airport. And the worst thing is they won't open until Sunday. That's actually the same office. They won't open until Sunday. I'm stuck
Get
here.
your visa.
Yeah. And I said, cool, have a great time. Because as you can hear, I'm in an ambulance car heading to a hospital. And all I could hear was what when I hung up, we arrived. So the doctors over there say that it was such a bad case of conjunctivitis that they have never seen this before. But it is conjunctivitis. By now, I can't see anything because they put some greasy stuff into my eyes, which is some antibiotic. They gave me 9 different ointments and
my gosh.
stuff to put, and I can't see nothing. The hospital says they will actually drive me to my hotel because I can't see anything. And there's this nurse, she's going to go with me. So they drive me to this hotel. I told them the name of the hotel. We get there. I can't see anything. I'm being guided as a blind person. And, with at the reception desk, and, they talk in Turkish, and I say, hi, I'm sorry, I'm your guest. I was supposed to check yesterday. I'm a day late, but we have this 7-day arrangement. I arrived, and you see what happened to me. I need my room. And they say, can I have your voucher? I said, voucher? Oh my God, it's in the suitcase in Dubai. Ma'am, we don't know your last name. We only go with the number on the voucher. I don't know the number.
Oh, no.
Even if I had it, I wouldn't be able to read it. It's in Dubai. So they believed me. They said, we're going to give you a very, very nice room, and we'll take the voucher from your suitcase when it arrives. And I said, it doesn't even have to be nice. I mean, I can't see the room anyway. They brought a doctor and a hotel nurse. Those two put me in bed. I have no underwear, nothing to wear, no pajama, no toothbrush, nothing. And this nurse taught me how to get out of my bed and tap along the wall to the toilet. And that's it. And she's going to come every 4 hours and put that medication into my eyes to make sure I don't see anything. So I was there all alone, and I asked him to turn the television on, so at least something is talking. And the only available channel was National Geographic. I was laying there for the whole weekend, not seeing anything. They brought me food, and National Geographic actually keeps repeating the same over and over again.
A loop.
Yeah, it's a loop. So for 24, it felt like for 36 hours, I know everything about some bird that nests at the Dead Sea on the Jordanian side. I know exactly when it nests, all of its habits. I forgot its name, but I've never seen that bird. And I know everything about Chinese magnetic trains, all of their characteristics, because I've listened to this about 6 times. Finally, somewhere on Sunday, the phone rings again. It's Mike, and he says, well, the visa is settled, but all the flights are full. I can fly only on Monday morning. Okay, so fly on Monday morning. He comes in on Monday evening, completely in distress. What happened to him? He was in Dubai, he was about to board the plane, and he's giving his passport and his ticket, and this woman says, Mr. Robinson, you have already boarded. No, here. But there is a Michael Robinson already in the plane. I'm here. So there's this delay of 45 minutes. It's a security issue. Who's in the plane? Finally, one of these stewardesses figures, wait a second, there's this one-way ticket, Michael Allen Robinson, and a return ticket. These may be 2 people. Turns out, to cut the long story short, it was this guy with the same name, same middle name, born on the same day in the same hospital in Providence.
Oh, man.
And both of them find themselves in that plane. And after all of this, let them sit together. They went to the same school. It was just unbelievable. So he was so tired after this jail episode that he slept throughout Tuesday. And on Wednesday, we went to see Antalya, and on Thursday, our vacation was over.
A memorable trip.
Yes. So that's my trip from hell. And now I have to lay down for half an hour.
Thank you very much, Aida. Appreciate this. We are back. on the Brink. We're talking with Hawley Johnson and some of our other friends about traveling, what can go wrong, and how things sort of end up right even when they go wrong. My latest misadventure was a trip. Holly, you weren't on this one, to New Zealand. We thought we were so lucky. We were going to get back from New Zealand with a direct flight to New York City. Only it didn't work out that way. We have been expecting flight troubles because they're so common now. But we had dinner. I had taken my Ambien. I had gone to sleep. I was waiting to wake up in New York City. And I did wake up, and it was to an odd thing on the screen in front of you that shows you the route, and it was a loop. And I said, wow, this Ambien's really, kicking my butt here. Look at it, I can't even tell. It feels like we're going back to towards Australia and New Zealand. That's exactly what had happened. There had been a fire at a terminal at JFK. No planes were being allowed to land there. And so after flying 8.5 hours, we had gotten as far as around the Hawaiian Islands. The plane, a New Zealand Airlines flight, turned around and went back to Auckland. So I spent 16 hours on a flight to nowhere. It was so exhausting. And we all thought, that they didn't wake us up in the middle of the night to tell us about this change in plans. I figured they would just hit us with it in the morning. Only people at home were getting notes that the loved ones that they were supposed to pick up at the airport would not be there because the flight had gone back. Something terrible had happened, something about a fire at JFK. Everyone on the plane was buzzing and poking each other. We thought it was a terrorist attack. It was so crazy and terrifying. And then, of course, we had another 24 hours before we could get back on another plane. That was the longest and most horrible flight I ever took. And we never did make it to New York. The plane finally landed us in Los Angeles. And we got off the plane exhausted, tired, hadn't eaten any hot food in 38 hours. And we still were 3,000 miles from home. I almost gave up traveling after that. But I didn't. And how about you?
Were you in economy class during those
Oh,
hours?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Cramped. Yeah, it was awful.
Oh, that's hell.
Yeah. I don't think I've still recovered, actually. This was back in last December. So
Well,
you have one more story too.
And it's a similar, well, not a similar one. It's also a flight story. Back in the day, as you may remember, going to Sarajevo was always a really sketchy undertaking in bad weather, because this was probably about 20 years ago. The planes, I think it was the airports, didn't have the technology for the planes to land automatically. They always had to land manually. The pilots essentially had to see the runway. So for some reason, for business, I think I had to go to Sarajevo in the middle of the winter. It was in December. And what they would do is they would put you on the plane, and then you would fly to Sarajevo, and the plane would attempt to land. And if it couldn't land, it would be like, oops, oh, sorry, we got to pull up the plane. Now, Sarajevo is a valley surrounded by huge mountains. So the plane kind of dives into the mountain. It's like, oh, sorry, no, we got to go up. And then it would turn around and be like, oh, we're going to try again. And keep trying to land. And if it couldn't land, oh, well, we have to go back. And we're going to go back to wherever we started, and then we'll try again another day. So this happened to me on this particular flight. And that took a few hours, like 3-4 hours. And so we ended up going back to the original airport, which I think was Vienna. And they left us in the airport for a few hours, and then they put us back on the plane. And we attempted another flight to Sarajevo. And that aborted mission, sent us back. And at this point, they said, well, you have to stay overnight, and you can try tomorrow to get to Sarajevo. So I set my alarm. I had a ticket for a plane out in the morning, and somehow I messed up my alarm. I woke up, I had missed my plane. I'm frantic. I go right to the airport, and they're like, well, the bad news is we can't get you to Sarajevo today. The airport's just not open. So what we can do is we can send you to Zagreb, and this is a city in Croatia, and then you can get an overnight bus. It's about 8 hours from Zagreb to Sarajevo. And I'm like, oh my God, well, I don't have a choice. So I have to do this. So I take the flight, and I'm sitting there in my seat. And there's this very chatty, large gentleman next to me. And he turns out to be a NATO soldier also trying to make his way to Sarajevo. luckily he knew what I was trying to do, and he was trying to do it himself. There's apparently like 50 other people in the plane in the same boat, and we were all going to try to get off the plane and then run to the bus station to get the last few seats on the bus to Sarajevo. And he said that he would help me. And I was like, oh, that would be awesome. So we get off the plane. And of course, he's a man. He doesn't have any checked baggage. And I did, because I never go anywhere
Oh,
with at least 50 pounds of baggage. So, first and last time in my life, my bag was the first one off the plane. And I'm like, that's my bag. He grabs it. He grabs me, and we're flying off. And we are the first people in line at the bus station. And they sell us 2 tickets, but they really didn't have 2 seats at that point on the bus. But it didn't matter. We were getting on the bus, and it was going to be an overnight bus. So I was like, listen, I need to get some water or some provisions before we get on. What I really wanted was a bottle of wine. So we're in a very civilized part of the world in Zagreb, and the newsstands sell wine. So I go running into the newsstand. I get water, wine, some snacks. We get on the bus, and the two of us are sitting in like the wheel well of like the bus, waiting for seats to open up as people get off. And I had this bottle of wine. I'm like, I don't have a wine opener. And I look at him, I'm like, you're a soldier. You must have something. Don't you have like a Swiss Army knife or a NATO knife or something? And he's like, I don't have anything. I'm like, oh my God, what kind of a soldier are you? So I was like, I had to open up my toiletry bag, and I go rummaging around. The only thing I could find was a toothbrush. And I'm like, all right, I've got to be able to do this. And I managed to open the wine with my toothbrush. I pushed the cork all the way into the wine bottle. And so we ended up having sort of wine and snacks overnight.
wonderful. How civilized. Very resourceful, very resourceful. We have run out of time, probably have gone way over time. I'm going to make executive producer Zach Grady do some real heavy editing, unfortunately, this week. But we always like to end our podcast with a toast. And this one, I'm raising my glass, Holly. I want to say bon voyage to you. I want to urge you to take the risk. Go out and see the world. Do not be reckless, sure, but don't be afraid. Don't be confined by fear. It's true. If you've learned nothing else than this tonight, you've learned that things can go wrong. But they can go wrong if you sit at home and do nothing too. And you will never feel more alive, more excited than if you are in a place where no one understands you. You're trying to figure your way out of being lost or being broke, or Holly being hungry. And then here's this really funny morale of the whole lesson here. Most troubles may seem like the worst disasters when you're living through them. You could be crying, you could be hurting. We've been both, but they do turn into the best stories. I hope we've proved that to you in this podcast.